Hi, everyone, and a warm welcome to another episode of the Talk Room series of podcasts. In this episode, we examine the question of how to be your best self. And we do that by examining mental health and well-being and how this applies to people's daily lives. For those people who have yet to see any of our previous podcasts, I'd like to introduce my co-presenter, Wendy, who is an accredited CBT psychotherapist and EMDR therapist in private practice. Wendy has been involved in the subject of mental health and well-being for over 35 years now, and it's an absolute pleasure to be here with you, Wendy, once again.
And thank you, Ian. And it's absolute pleasure for me to be with you as well again. So thank you so much for the introduction. And now to introduce you. You are a senior accredited National Counselling and Psychotherapy Society member and the founder of Hope Therapy and Counselling Services.
So I understand that we're going to cover a very sensitive topic today, the subject of child sexual abuse. So Wendy, maybe we can just start by asking, why have you chosen this subject today?
Yeah, a very important question, Ian. And what I wanted to focus on as I work full time as a psychotherapist, I often see the devastation of this particular type of abuse here. But the additional issue that I want to address today is that situations often become far more complicated. And this is due to misunderstanding and misinformation of what this problem is. And I just want to start by recommending that if this podcast raises an issue for you which is very sensitive and you feel yourself triggered, it's really important that you seek help. And you can seek help by many ways. Just call a friend or your partner or something like that. If you feel it's more serious, you can access support for mental health services via accident emergency. And there's also helplines such as the Samaritans. And there are notes later on if anybody feels the need to contact them. Just want to make sure if anybody's triggered, please actively seek help.
Yeah, and I cannot emphasize the importance of that enough. It's an incredibly important point to raise, Wendy. Thank you. Can we start with just trying to get an understanding of what we actually mean when we say childhood sexual abuse?
Yes, and sometimes I might refer to it CSA for short. And I think one of the main misconceptions about this situation is that they imagine from a film like a stranger in a dark alley, the sort of stereotypical version of that. But actually, unfortunately, more often the actual perpetrator is someone that the child knows. And this could be, I hate to say it, a family member or a family friend, even possibly a babysitter or a coach if they go to a local sports area, whatever. Or more and more nowadays, it can be somebody they've met online who they think is somebody very different to who they are. They portray themselves as a friend or something like that, but actually they are grooming them and they're a perpetrator online. So that's an increasing problem. And the first thing I really want to talk about is, how does this happen? The one particular aspect with this kind of abuse is that the perpetrator really focuses on building this trust. Okay, so we often know it as a term grooming. So this can take very many different situations and perspectives. Common things are like giving gifts to the child as well, or actually complimenting the child, making the child feel special. Really, if the child's perhaps a bit neglected or got low self-esteem, in comes this lovely person just giving you loads of compliments, loads of presents, giving out love and attention. It's all part of the grooming process. And then the next stage is they might just be pushing some little boundaries there, saying things like, this can be our secret. That's just between you and me. Let's not tell anybody. I'm going to buy you a very nice gift, but don't tell your mum. Okay? That's just our little secret. And this is where it starts to build upon that sort of incredible, sort of secretive attack that's very manipulative. Or another thing that can happen is at a certain point, the child can also be coerced in another way with threats, fear, or shame. So it might start off, this is our little secret, like that's it's all, but then it becomes more disturbing. It could be like, if you tell mummy's going to be very angry with you and she's not going to love you. She's not going to want you anymore. She's going to kick you out of the house. So you can see how the threat of actually telling somebody becomes very frightening, because that little person will believe them. They believe this person and they get very scared that their mummy is going to chuck them out of the house or something like that, or is going to be very angry with them. So this is how they manipulate the secrecy. How to actually spot whether a person is being abused can be quite difficult, but there's common situations or symptoms that you might notice. For example, nightmares. Maybe your child has been sleeping fine and then suddenly starts to have lots of nightmares about different things. Sleep problems, because they're very scared of the nightmares, because they're probably thinking of what's happened to them as well, is causing the nightmares. So they're having difficulty sleeping or worrying about going to sleep. That jumpiness, that hypervigilance that can happen sort of like this all the time. Suddenly they were relaxed and playing, and now they're like hypervigilant as well. Anxiety, such as trouble concentrating, and avoidance reminders. Maybe they might be very reluctant to go around and see this person, their friend, or something like that. Or maybe they start to be very quiet, withdrawn around that person as well. And you'll think, what's wrong with so he's a very nice person and he's very loving and caring towards you. Why would you suddenly be all off? That's very naughty behavior. He's very nice to you. And one of the difficulties with child sexual abuse is that children and even later adults often internalize this guilt and this self-blame. They feel terrible about the fact that they didn't fight off the perpetrator, or they didn't say no. And there's quite a few reasons for this. One is often the manipulation and the guilt around what's happened to them, which makes them feel they can't say no. But often it's disguised into like nice behavior, kissing and touching and everything like that. So the child might have very conflicting emotions about what they've had. They might have actually quite liked the presents. They might have liked the compliments. They might have liked the cuddles and things like that. So they actually feel very ashamed and very withdrawn about what to say or what not to say. So it's very important that the self-blame is part of the trauma that they actually feel. It's not proof of consent.
That's really good to know, Wendy. And it's good to know that there are symptoms that parents and carers can look out for as well. I understand that a common problem is that children find it very difficult to tell and often don't disclose until many years later. And I wonder whether you can just say something about that. Why is that the case?
Yes, and I think another misconception is it's very common to delay the telling, and there's lots and lots of reasons for this. You can imagine how, again, with this grooming of secrecy, and it's our little secret, and the threat, if you tell someone you're going to be in big trouble, just keeps the child sort of being terrified to tell anybody as well. But a very common fear that people have is they're very worried about not being believed. And this is often a very common experience. When they actually tell someone, it's almost so shocking to the parent or the caregiver. They'll think, of course, what are you talking about? Of course he's not. You remember sort of Jimmy Savile? Everybody thought, oh, he's such a nice person. He's a celebrity. Look how lovely he is, going to charity and spending all his time with all these people. They didn't believe them, which obviously makes things so much more shameful and terrible. It's almost like a double shame, isn't it, to actually not being believed. It's not a secondary trauma, really. And they're very worried about the impact it might have on the family as well. Like you say, if it's a close relative, the shock of all that can really break a family. And they're very worried about actually the sort of ripple effect it can actually have as well. And they can tell someone, the person doesn't believe them, but they can also say, you mustn't tell anyone because this is a family secret as well. And they're so worried about the shame on the family that, again, they coerce the child to keep it secret as well. And then you've got another layer of difficulty reporting it to the police. And this is a very difficult decision that people have to really think about, especially if it's historical. So they're an adult now and it's happened when they were a child. Telling the police can be extremely daunting for lots and lots of reasons. Actually saying all those things to the police and actually having to say it out explicitly can be very distressing for a person. It's almost like reliving the trauma when they actually have to disclose the information to the police as well. It can be very emotionally demanding, and actually recalling all the incidents, the dates and the times and everything like that can be very difficult. If it's a very long time ago and you're a child, you might remember the experiences, but you won't necessarily remember all the details or what happened one day. And also the memory gets fragmented as well. It doesn't actually remember it in a chronological order. So you remember bits here and bits there. So you'd be quite vague if you're recalling the story. So that can be misinterpreted. Oh, you're making it up, you're lying. But the actual trauma response is often quite a fragmented, vague experience. On a positive note, there isn't no time limit to reporting sexual offences, and you can still access medical and emotional support if you do choose to disclose. But what often the police might say to them, I've worked with people who've said this, is that there isn't enough evidence. We won't go to court because there isn't enough evidence, because it's one person's word against the other. And of course, even if they go and speak to the perpetrator, the person's obviously going to be most likely 99.9% is going to be complete denial and absolutely say nothing had happened. It's a very difficult thing to prove.
So there are two main issues. One is the physical abuse itself that's taken place, and then all of the difficulties and the challenges around disclosing the abuse and everything that comes with that as well. And I guess I wonder, as I'm thinking about that, what the longer term effects are of all of this, Wendy.
Absolutely. And this is where, again, people can very easily be misunderstood. And on a positive note, it's not that everybody is going to experience these difficulties. It means many people have gone on to live very rich, very connected lives, but actually it might be useful just to go through some sort of general experiences. So again, that people can look out for it as well. Just have your antennae open a little bit more to actually what might be going on. It can affect your emotional health. So very common that people can have high levels of anxiety, also low mood. Again, lots to do with guilt and shame and regret. Obviously, they can actually have PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, which is where perhaps the person felt either a severe injury or near to death. So they were so frightened they thought they were going to die, or very possibly injured. So there's a whole load of symptoms around PTSD. A very common one that, again, people don't really understand is dissociation. And I think what happens here is sometimes the abuse is so overwhelming to the person is that they often disassociate. They feel numb. They don't actually feel there. They don't feel present. They often go off into like dream world because it's so awful what happens to them. And then this is actually part of the problem with recall, is they often don't remember it because they've disassociated. And then it's, again, very difficult to prove. So that's a very common one as well. And often the guilt and the shame and like you say, these very mixed emotions, because enjoying as I said before, enjoying the attention and all the nice bits can cause an awful lot of ambivalence as well. So shames and that can actually make them feel as though they want to turn that anger into themselves. So they might start harming themselves or have suicidal thoughts. It's just not worth it. I can't ever recover from this. It's just so awful. What's the point in going on? So that's really important to address that. Very common behaviors is boundaries and trust issues. So often people become very people pleasing, very compliant or yes people, when they actually feel as though they're under a lot of pressure. They often accentuate their fight or flight or freeze response. They often get stuck, really. Again, very compliant behavior, going along with things to keep the peace, or avoiding relationships. It can really affect relationships, closeness, because closest to them is not safe. It's dangerous as well. This obviously can affect a person's relationship issues regarding intimacy and sex, during sexual contact. There obviously can be a lot of difficulties with touch, or very ambivalent kind of behavior as well, wanting it but also pushing it away. So that can make a partner feel very confused as to what's happened to that person as well. Obviously, if you've got problems with, you've got nightmares, or you're still not sleeping properly, you can't concentrate, that can really affect your schoolwork as well. And therefore, you don't do so well at school, you don't get so many good grades, you can be overwhelmed with stress as well, because you haven't really learned, you're not free, they've taken away your childhood really, so you've lost that sort of innocence really. And an example I can give actually is somebody was using words which she shouldn't have known at that age. Nobody actually picked up on it, and people were laughing at her because she used these words, but nobody picked up it was actually a sign of abuse. So yeah, it can actually affect your career prospects and things like that. Obviously, your health as well, trauma and stress in the body. And if they haven't worked on it or shared it openly, that can actually show up physically. So often you get somatic symptoms like headaches or muscle pain. Often people feel a lot of trauma or stress anxiety down the middle of their body, the vagus nerve it's called. So therefore heart palpitations or gut problems. And obviously because the memories are very distressing and they're too worried or ashamed to talk about them, they often actually dumb down their feelings by using substance misuse or food or alcohol or drugs. So that becomes like a further problem as well. It's really important people develop compassion for themselves and realize these are just responses to a very difficult, significant trauma that they've been to. Is it okay if I just perhaps give some examples of some case studies?
Please do, Wendy.
Yeah, okay, thank you so much. So just want to emphasize, I'm not disclosing anybody's story. They are fictional, but they are classic examples of how therapy might help somebody. Okay. So the first one I'm going to talk about is just a name called Sophie, and classic example of survivor stories. So at the moment she's 32, she's in a caring profession, and she's in a relationship with a partner. I'm going to call him Tom. Common experiences when they're actually getting intimate, she just freezes. Afterwards, she just feels deeply ashamed, but she can't explain why she didn't speak up. She's not used to sharing about it. She's too embarrassed. She's too ashamed. She's too frozen. She also finds it very difficult to set personal boundaries because the abuse has infiltrated her personal boundaries. She wasn't able to say no. So she hasn't learned to say no to anything. So she says yes to everything. She says yes to extra shifts. She says yes to any favors people asked her. She yes to work opportunities. She doesn't know the word no. So often secondary problems like feeling burnt out will happen. So an example of how therapy might help Sophie is that understanding what she went through. So that grooming taught her that survival for her meant being agreeable and quiet. Her nervous system, she learned that saying no could be dangerous. It could make that person angry. And then obviously more abuse can happen in many ways. It could be even physical or emotional abuse, not even sexual abuse. It could be other types of abuse can come with it as well. So she might start off, number one, understanding of problems, just practicing some self-soothing skills like grounding skills. We've mentioned this before, Ian, like the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, which is a grounding skill you can use. And then perhaps working on some sort of micro boundaries, some little assertiveness scripts. So she says, when somebody asks her to do something, she might say, oh, let me get back to you, or I need a minute, or I just need to check my diary. So she's not putting herself in this yes, pleasing behavior as well, or I'm not comfortable for that. And that can be with her partner, or it can be at work. She can work on those in all areas of the absolute relationships where she finds it difficult to say no. And then she can move on to EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization reprocessing. And this is really good therapy to just work on specific memories, and also with sexual abuse, body sensations that probably have made her go into this freeze response as well. And the freeze response was just to keep herself safe as well. So it didn't do anything wrong, just a way to keep herself safe. And so the memories get processed and then they get less, they feel less raw, and her body learns to heal and no longer needs to react to the dangers. It's retraining the body to respond in a much more healthier way to intimacy. And another thing that can help is that her partner, Tom, can come along and actually learn to say things in a way which is trusting and supportive, and how he can check in with Sophie to make sure that she doesn't feel any pressure as well. It's really important that she understands that the freeze response is there to protect her. It's not a weakness. The body can relearn that the present is a safe place. It's the past which was traumatic, and that the boundaries can be clear and doable. And then the second one is, I've called this person Aisha, and she's 27. So her example was, as a teenager, she was abused by a trusted family friend. Again, very friendly. I've heard this before. The neighbour down the road comes in and very friendly and offers to babysit and things like this. And a very charming, very nice person, very good with children, very good with the children. It's all these sort of grooming kind of behaviours that go on to build the trust, not only with the child, but also with the parents. The parents can get groomed as well in that situation. Okay. But it did happen, and she did try to tell an adult. But as we said before, the problem was it was dismissed. And now what she noticed is she's just angry now. She's angry with everyone. She's angry with her partner. She's angry with her friends. She doesn't want to have any relationship. She keeps them all at arm's lengths. And then she can't cope. So she drinks a lot of alcohol just to sort of numb out these sort of very angry feelings that she has. And she feels broken, and she feels, again, very ashamed of herself. She feels helpless about the situations. So say this time she goes to trauma-focused cognitive behavior therapy. So this is a kind of therapy which is really focused on helping people with traumatic experiences. And always in therapy, the first stage is really called stabilization, where the person actually learns some basic skills to actually help to get their daily routine in a better place. For example, learning sleep routines, perhaps working on reducing the alcohol, learning to identify the triggers that sort of create these sort of angry responses, but also trying to learn how to calm herself, how to self-soothe herself as well. Okay. That would be the first phase. And then the next phase would be to identify thoughts that she believes she's internalized from the trauma, and classic beliefs that somebody with CSA would say is, it's my fault. They've internalized that they're the people who are at fault. Okay. And often the group would tell them that as well, tell them they're naughty. This is why they're having this, because they're naughty, or that type of thing. Or again, I lead people on. Or she's told somebody and nobody will ever believe her. Okay. So really looking at these beliefs and very gently challenging them, looking actually at the facts, learning what's called compassion-focused therapy, learning to be kinder to herself, to really understand the impact of the trauma has had on her life, and how the traumatic incidents by this perpetrator has made her feel. So it's not her fault. And this time she chooses to write her trauma, and she writes as much as she can. Okay, she can't write it all at once. She just writes it in bits, and she talks about it in session. And then if she needs to, she can stop and use grounding techniques to help her if she feels overwhelmed. So she also focuses on developing some relationship skills. So another common area is a fear of it happening again. So quite often we would talk about red flags. Okay, so what is it about that person? Is it a red flag or a green flag? If it is a red flag, what can you do to keep yourself safe in that situation? So they learn the difference between just reacting to everybody and keeping everybody away, but actually maybe taking some small steps, but actually being very aware if somebody actually starts to use manipulative behavior towards them. Okay. Regarding intimacy, again, that will be discussed and maybe paced to make sure that she feels okay, she's in control, and she is consenting with her partner in a loving relationship as well, of course. Another skill to use is to practice what's called I statements. So where she actually, again, asserts her boundaries in a way which is explained in a very clear, very easy way. So I need some time more. I need to stop now. I need reassurance. I'm not okay with that. So again, good communication skills so that she feels confident that she can develop a trusting relationship with her partner as well. There's an organisation called SARC, which stands for Sexual Assault Referral Centre, and they can actually help with information options as well. She also might be considering disclosing to the police, but she can get perhaps help with that, talking about the pros and cons. She can understand the process more, what to expect, and whether it's something she wants to do as well. That might be another thing she wants to talk about. And she can talk about that in therapy, or she can go to a specialist organisation like SARC and talk through the pros and cons. So she actually feels a bit more empowered to make that decision as well. So basically, to summarise, skills first, then trauma processing, then working on the life that you want to live. So you're not avoiding things that cause problem, like not having relationships, which obviously has an impact on if they want children, everything like that. They don't trust a relationship, that can make their life even worse because they haven't built up the trust.
That's really interesting, Wendy, really helpful just to start to understand a little bit about these things. I guess one of the questions that lots of people would be asking right now is how counselling, how therapy might help somebody who has gone through this really awful experience of CSA. Can you just talk a little bit more about that?
Yes, there are two sort of evidence-based therapies. It doesn't mean to say that a person can go to a counsellor, and if they feel that the relationship, as Ian, is the most important thing, that actually simply by sharing and witnessing the person's story, male or female, whatever the person's been abused. Sometimes it can be worse for a male because there can be more shame involved. So both sexes can be abused. That might be enough to actually let them to feel accepted and validated. But just going back to the evidence-based therapies, one is called trauma-focused CBT, which I used in the example there. And there's several kind of components to this. One is, I think, psychoeducation, actually understanding the impact of how trauma can affect you. And I find myself explaining a lot to people who've had this. It's really important that their experience is validated, it's listened to, and it's understood, and that they are taken seriously. Whatever they say, I take seriously and I believe them, because there's all this sort of not believing before. So that's, I think, is a really, really important thing. Actually grounding and emotional regulation. So sometimes people feel like the case study I said, that she just feels angry all the time, or she's either angry or she's depressed. She's no emotional regulation, actually learning skills. So the person actually feels a little bit more level. They don't feel like this, out of control their emotions. That can be a very good skill that a person can learn and actually feel on a day-to-day basis, I'm actually now better grounded as a person. So those are quite important things. I think there's a huge component, as I've already said before, about dealing with the beliefs of self, shame, and criticism. And this is where I think explaining the grooming experience is really important, because of the words. What happens when you're a little child, you believe what people tell you. You believe Tooth Fairy, Father Christmas, we say all these things. So this sort of person coming along and they say nice things to you. So actually understanding the grooming process, I think, is very key to actually having effective therapy as well. And then the third thing, as I said before, is reclaiming your life. So this is about stopping the therapy affecting your life right now, stopping the therapy, avoiding intimacy, avoiding having relationships, working on perhaps missing out, perhaps in their childhood they didn't do very well in school because they just had this repressed trauma, and maybe going back and actually learning a course where they really want to be, say they want to be a nurse, going back and going over those qualifications that they want to do, so they're not missing out on their dream goals. Really, that's more about reclaiming their life. What is it they want? And that's really important part of the process, is that they are no longer a victim of their past abuse. They are often the word is used, survivor, if they like that word, but they have reclaimed their life. It's really important. And the second evidence-based therapy is the EMDR, which I mentioned earlier. And what's really useful about this particular part of the therapy is almost like it's called the body remembers. So especially in child sexual abuse, they would actually have sensations or feelings which the perpetrators encourage them to have, which will remain stuck in their body as well. So EMDR is really good at actually taking away those memories. It can be very difficult to focus on those memories and work on them. And you don't always have to talk about the memories as well. Sometimes they're just sensations you can work on as well. But if you can actually be released from those sensations so you just don't feel them anymore, that's a very powerful technique. But I do think it's very important it's done very sensitively as well. And also the brain refiles the memories as well. Rather than being a trauma memory, it becomes like an ordinary memory, which doesn't hurt so much when they think about it as well. They just don't feel the same way about the memory. The memory might be there, but they just don't have the attached feelings or trauma associated with that memory. Yeah, those 3 steps are really important. Step 1 is grounding, stabilization. Step 2 is working on the trauma processing. And step 3 is how can I reclaim my life? And that could be reporting it, even if it's a really difficult thing, even if you're not believed, even if it's a very long, slow process. The act of reporting it and saying, this is what happened to me, might be very important to that person, and accepting that they might not get the result that they want to, but the importance of saying this is what happened to me is part of the process. Okay, and there's plenty of guidance out there for it. So they're my key points.
Thank you, Wendy. Really interesting. I guess as I hear you, one of the thoughts that goes through my head is that for any number of reasons, maybe people aren't ready to reach out to a therapist yet, maybe finances is an issue, maybe for one reason or another, this just isn't the right time yet. I'm wondering, is there something else that you can recommend? If therapy, maybe that's the longer term thing that they're aiming for, but they're just not ready to take that step, or they're not able to take that step. Is there something else they can be doing in the meantime?
Absolutely. This is one of the reasons I wanted to do the podcast, is to actually educate people about this very difficult, very sensitive subject so that they understand it better. And that might help them to start to think more about how can I address the situation. You're absolutely right. The first phase, the stabilization phase, is very much something they can work on themselves as well. I mentioned the grounding techniques earlier. And this is quite a common technique that most people know, but if you don't know it, I'm just going to explain it really. So it goes 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It starts with 5 things you can see. Just sit down somewhere in a room, doesn't matter where, and you work out and look at 5 things you can see. Then 4 things you can feel. You can go around the room and touch 4 things. 3 things you can hear. You just notice a little bit of silence and notice 3 things. 2 things you can smell. And 1 thing you can taste. And it doesn't matter if there's nothing to taste, it's absolutely fine. It's just going through that sort of process. Another thing that I really is actually, it's such a simple thing, is keep your eyes open, keep your feet planted, just breathe out slowly. There's something about grounding by having your feet on the floor, feeling you sitting yourself on the seat, especially with disassociation, just that feeling of, I'm doing it now, sensation of your feet touching the floor. You're grounded, you're here right now, you're safe. Okay, these are past memories, you're here. Classic breathing techniques, some people like them, but I think it's worth mentioning. The idea really is to breathe from your diaphragm. Sometimes it's called belly breathing, but you breathe in and you count up to 4, very slowly and gently. But when you breathe out, you count to 6. So the exhale is slightly longer than the inhale. And that actually calms your body down. It's called calming your, there's a sympathetic nervous system, the parasympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous, S stands for stress, so you've got all that fight or flight. P stands for peace, so by breathing in a certain way, focusing on your belly, you're calming your whole body down and it's relaxing it. So that's a really good one to do. I mentioned earlier this idea of micro boundaries, and this is just using tiny little words that just give you a little bit of feeling of control as well, or just a bit of ability to say no. Okay, examples could be just, okay, just take a pause, just take a moment. I have the right to change my mind. I need more information before I decide. And you can actually start practicing these little sayings as well, or you can have them on a card or have them on your phone. Because sometimes when you're in the moment, somebody asks you something, you can go into a stress response and you're so used to saying, yes, yes, of course I will. Yes, because you've learned that response. You can actually just have a bit of a reminder, or perhaps a situation where, say, your boss comes up to you and says, can you do can you work all weekend type of thing. And then you automatically practice, can I get back to you about that? You just say those words, yeah, I'll get back to you. And it gives you time to go away, think about things, perhaps prepare a response, take your time and go back. And then hopefully you think it's okay to say no to that, because it's a very unreasonable request, isn't it? Okay. Being clear about what your triggers are is also a very good thing. This is very cognitive behavior therapy. You might notice your responses are going to be fight or flight. So you're going to be panicking, shaking, you go into that sort of like stomach churning type of thing, freezing as well, because often with child sexual abuse, you often freeze your body because you're just too worried about moving, you're too scared to move. So often the freeze response is very common. Okay. Just remind yourself what might trigger you as well. And if you're trying to go for therapy, it's okay if you can to avoid those situations. Excuse me. So it might be a house where it happened. You might want to go and visit a relative and they move into the house, and that's you is just, that's just no way I can do that. And that's okay as well. Smell is interesting as well. Sometimes a smell can trigger off a very strong response. The smell of a person, or maybe the smell of perhaps a person wasn't very hygienic, for instance, and that sort of body odor thing, that can really trigger off a person. Okay, what I know is if that happens to me and I feel that, I've got to be very careful, just walk away. Or maybe you're in a very crowded environment. I think, okay, that's not good for me. It's too many people. It's okay for me to take my time and just move away from that. And that's absolutely fine because it's triggering me too much. Also, just moving outside a situation, especially you're triggered, changing your body temperature, like holding something cold, can actually take you away from the situation. Or listening to soothing music is very good. It just calms your body as well. So there's lots of things. Think about what really helps you to calm and self-soothe as well. And maybe have a code word between you and your partner as well, so that you don't have to think too hard about saying no. It could be just I need some time, whatever it is. And so the partner understands that you're feeling triggered by some situation, whatever it is, and that person immediately understands that it's mutually communicated, and that okay, and then that can make you feel I'm safe again, I can self-regulate, and then continue as well. And also the partner can just have an agreement where they check in with them as well and just make sure that person's okay as well. And just knowing that that partner is going to be sensitive to that and say check in with you, that can be reassuring, therefore you're less likely to react to that. So there's lots and lots of little things that a person can do just to improve their well-being.
Lots of really important information in there, Wendy. So thank you so much for sharing that. Lots of things that I'm sure people will find really helpful. I'm wondering if there are particular organisations out there, if there are support type organisations out there, especially in England, because or the UK, which most of our listeners will be present in, that would be able to support people that are experiencing challenges with this most awful of presentations.
Absolutely. And I'm going to put the details in the show notes. I'm just going to mention a couple of organizations, and it can be a first step. It can be just phoning somebody and who is experienced and understands the issues, just making a phone call, and that person will probably feel so much better by being understood, being listened to and supported can be a very good first step. So these organisations are amazing at the support they can provide. So you've got Rape Crisis, England and Wales. You've got the SARC, which I mentioned earlier as well. Obviously, talking therapies, they will deal with child sexual abuse, especially if you've got PTSD symptoms. You've got the Samaritans, you can phone them up. That's a 24/7 service, and the volunteers are trained as well. It's excellent service. You've got the NSPCC if you're an adult worried about a child, and you've got Childline, which is for children and young people. And they're just some of the examples. There might be some more local services that you're aware of. Nowadays, most people go to the internet and see actually what services are available, but there are some national services that can help. And these are all sort of people who are trained.
Thank you so much for talking about that really important subject, Wendy. So if people have listened to the podcast and they think that they're ready to reach out for professional help, what is the next step? What should they be thinking about next? What can they be doing?
I think the most important thing is to understand and to learn, and then to be compassionate towards themselves for what they've been through as well, because CSE can leave such deep marks. It's such an invasion of your personal boundaries and your privacy as well. It can affect your bodies. You could even be harmed from it as well, obviously. Your trust, the damage it does to relationships. But what I really want to emphasize, with the right help and support, healing is very possible. And if you are a victim, you are not to blame, especially as a child. You are nowhere near to blame as well. Your boundaries are really important to you. They really matter, and help is available. If you know somebody, or perhaps somebody who you happen to know has had some kind of negative experience as a child, maybe encourage them to listen to this podcast as well, and it might help them consider seeking help and support. My website is called wendycastellina.com, and people can contact me there if they actually want any more information or any more resources that I can offer, or have a conversation about whether they think therapy is right, is appropriate to them. And what about you, Ian? What help can you offer?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important that people know that if they reach out to the right people, there are people there that will offer support. They'll listen, they'll be alongside, they won't judge, and they won't put them under any sort of pressure. Here at Hope Therapy and Counselling Services, we have fully qualified counsellors who will do free consultations with people where we just take some time to listen to the needs of the individual. As I say, it's a completely free service, and we just talk about whether counselling is right for that person at that particular stage. And then we talk about some of the options that might be available and the things that you've talked about, things like CBT, things like EMDR, but also other therapeutic approaches as well, are approaches that we can offer. People can look at our website, which is www.hopefulminds.co.uk. That's www.hopefulminds.co.uk. We have a variety of free resources on the website, but also people can just book in for a completely free consultation with a qualified counsellor and just talk about what next steps might look like for the individual. So thank you so much for today, Wendy. Such an important subject to be talking about. And I think the really important message that I came away with is that there is help for people out there that have gone through the most challenging of times. There are people like yourself, there are people like Hope and other organisations as well that are able to offer support. So if people feel that it's the right time, please do reach out. Thank you for this, and thank you for everybody listening and being a part of this experience here today. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Ian.